The autumn rain pelted against the windows of the small villa outside Florence as Niccolò Machiavelli sat hunched over his desk, candlelight flickering across the pages of what would become one of history's most influential works. The year was 1513, and the former diplomat, now in exile, was crafting principles that would echo through centuries, teaching ambitious souls how to command attention, respect, and power in a world that often seemed indifferent to merit alone. What Machiavelli discovered in his years of political observation wasn't just a strategy for princes and rulers, it was a blueprint for anyone who had ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. His insights revealed that there exists a fundamental truth about human nature: people respond not to what you deserve, but to what you demonstrate. They don't notice the quietly competent, they notice those who understand the delicate art of making themselves impossible to ignore. Part 1: The Foundation of Undeniable Presence. The essence of Machiavelli's philosophy for commanding attention lies not in seeking approval or validation, but in creating a presence so compelling that others must take notice. This begins with understanding a crucial distinction that most people miss entirely: the difference between being liked and being respected. While being liked is pleasant, being respected is powerful. While being liked is temporary, being respected endures. Machiavelli observed that those who command attention consistently share certain characteristics that set them apart from the masses who blend into the background of life. These individuals understand that attention is not given freely, it must be earned through deliberate action and strategic positioning. The first principle involves the cultivation of what Machiavelli termed virtue, not virtue in the moral sense, but excellence in execution. This means becoming exceptionally skilled at something that matters, something that others need or want. But here's where most people go wrong: they develop skills and then wait patiently to be discovered. Machiavelli understood that skill without display is like a lamp under a basket, useful perhaps, but invisible to those who might benefit from its light. Consider the example of Lorenzo de' Medici, who didn't simply accumulate wealth quietly. He transformed his financial success into cultural patronage, making himself the center of Florence's artistic renaissance. When Michelangelo needed a patron, when Botticelli sought commission, when poets required support, all roads led to Lorenzo. He made himself indispensable not just through money, but through the strategic application of that money in ways that created lasting visibility and influence. The modern application of this principle requires understanding your environment and identifying the gaps that exist, the problems unsolved, the needs unmet, the opportunities overlooked. Then, instead of simply filling these gaps quietly, you must fill them in a way that demonstrates your unique value and makes your contribution unmistakable. This doesn't mean being loud or boastful. Machiavelli despised empty showmanship. Instead, it means being strategic about how you reveal your capabilities. When you solve a problem, ensure that the solution bears your signature. When you provide value, make certain that value is traceable back to you. When you exceed expectations, do so in ways that create stories people want to tell others. The second foundational principle involves the careful management of scarcity. Machiavelli noted that people value what they cannot easily obtain. This applies not just to material goods, but to access, attention, and expertise. Those who make themselves too available, too eager to please, too quick to say yes, often find themselves taken for granted. Conversely, those who maintain a certain selectivity, who say no as often as they say yes, who guard their time and attention as precious resources, naturally become more valued. This doesn't mean being difficult or aloof, but rather being intentional about where you invest your energy. When you become known as someone who chooses carefully where to engage, your engagement becomes more meaningful. When people know they must earn your attention rather than simply request it, they begin to view you differently. The story of Cesare Borgia illustrates this perfectly. Despite his controversial reputation, Borgia commanded attention throughout Italy not because he was the most powerful, he wasn't, but because he was unpredictable and selective in his alliances. Potential allies and enemies alike had to consider his position because they couldn't take his support or opposition for granted. He made himself a crucial variable in every important equation. In the contemporary world, this translates to being selective about the projects you take on, the meetings you attend, the requests you fulfill. When you say yes to everything, your yes loses its value. When you reserve your yes for the opportunities that truly matter, both to your goals and to the impact you can make, your engagement becomes an event rather than an expectation. The third foundational element is the cultivation of a reputation for results. Machiavelli emphasized that intentions matter far less than outcomes. The world doesn't remember what you tried to do, it remembers what you actually accomplished. This means shifting your focus from effort to impact, from activity to achievement, from being busy to being effective. This principle requires a fundamental change in how you approach your work and commitments. Instead of measuring yourself by hours worked or tasks attempted, you must measure yourself by problems solved and value created. Instead of seeking credit for good intentions, you must seek recognition for tangible results. But here's the crucial insight that Machiavelli understood and that most people miss: results must be visible to be valuable. A tree that falls in a forest with no one around may or may not make a sound, but it certainly doesn't make an impact on anyone's awareness. Your achievements, no matter how significant, must be communicated in ways that allow others to understand and appreciate their importance. This requires developing what Machiavelli would recognize as political skill, the ability to translate your accomplishments into language that resonates with your audience. When you solve a technical problem, you must be able to explain its business impact. When you improve a process, you must be able to articulate the benefits to those who care about such things. When you create value, you must be able to demonstrate that value in terms that matter to the people whose attention you seek. The art lies in doing this without appearing to brag or self-promote. Machiavelli understood that the most powerful communication about your achievements comes not from your own mouth, but from the observations and testimonials of others. This means creating situations where your results speak for themselves and where other people naturally want to share the story of what you've accomplished. Consider how this might work in practice. Instead of simply completing a project and moving on to the next one, you document the challenges you faced, the solutions you developed, and the outcomes you achieved. You share this documentation not as self-promotion, but as knowledge that might benefit others facing similar challenges. You present your methods and results at team meetings, industry conferences, or internal forums not to boast, but to contribute to the collective understanding of how such problems can be solved. When you approach your achievements this way, something remarkable happens. People begin to see you not just as someone who gets things done, but as someone who gets things done in ways that others can learn from. You become not just a doer, but a thought leader. You transform from being someone who executes tasks to someone who develops and shares methodologies. This transformation is crucial because it shifts you from being replaceable to being unique. Anyone might be able to complete a task, but not everyone can complete it in your particular way, with your specific insights, using your distinctive approach. When you develop a reputation for not just achieving results but for achieving them in ways that create new knowledge and capabilities, you become someone that organizations and individuals actively seek out rather than simply utilize when convenient. The foundation of undeniable presence, therefore, rests on these three pillars: demonstrable excellence that fills important gaps, strategic scarcity that creates value through selectivity, and visible results that establish a reputation for meaningful impact. These elements work together to create what Machiavelli understood as the basis for all lasting influence: the perception that you are not just useful, but essential. When you master these foundational principles, you begin to notice changes in how others respond to you. Your opinions are sought more frequently. Your input is valued more highly. Your time becomes more precious to others because they recognize that access to your capabilities is not unlimited or guaranteed. You transition from being someone who responds to opportunities to someone for whom opportunities are created. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen through grand gestures or dramatic announcements. Instead, it happens through the accumulation of moments where you demonstrate your unique value, where you solve problems others cannot solve, where you create outcomes others appreciate but cannot replicate. Each such moment adds to your reputation, and reputation, as Machiavelli knew, is the foundation upon which all influence is built. The beauty of this approach is that it's available to anyone, regardless of their starting position or current circumstances. You don't need to be born into privilege, given special opportunities, or blessed with extraordinary natural talents. You need only to understand that attention and influence follow value, and that value must be created, demonstrated, and communicated strategically. As you begin to implement these foundational principles, remember that Machiavelli's insights were born from careful observation of what actually works, not what people think should work or what they wish would work. The world responds to strength, competence, and strategic thinking. It responds to those who understand how to create and demonstrate value in ways that others cannot ignore. Your goal is not to manipulate or deceive, but to reveal your true capabilities in ways that make their importance undeniable. You are not seeking to create a false impression of your value, but to ensure that your genuine value is recognized and appreciated by those whose attention and respect you seek to earn. Part 2: The strategic implementation of power. Once the foundation of undeniable presence is established, Machiavelli's teachings reveal the next crucial phase: the strategic implementation of power through calculated action and psychological understanding. This is where most people falter, having built capability but lacking the sophistication to deploy it effectively. They possess the tools but lack the wisdom to use them in ways that create lasting influence and command sustained attention. The heart of this phase lies in understanding what Machiavelli called the lion and the fox, the dual nature required for true effectiveness. The lion represents strength, courage, and the ability to face challenges directly. The fox represents cunning, adaptability, and the ability to navigate complex social and political terrain. Most people develop only one of these aspects, making them predictable and, therefore, manageable by others. True power comes from the ability to be both when circumstances require it. The lion aspect involves the willingness to take bold action when the situation demands it. This doesn't mean being reckless or aggressive, but rather being willing to make decisions and take stands when others hesitate or defer. In every organization, community, or social group, there are moments when someone must step forward to address a difficult issue, propose a challenging solution, or take responsibility for an uncertain outcome. These moments are opportunities for those who understand Machiavellian principles. When such moments arise, most people wait for someone else to act first. They want to see how things develop before committing themselves. They prefer to follow rather than lead, to criticize rather than create, to analyze rather than decide. This creates a vacuum that can be filled by anyone bold enough to act with conviction and intelligence. The strategic implementation of power requires recognizing these vacuums and filling them in ways that demonstrate your unique capabilities. This might mean volunteering to lead a difficult project that others avoid, proposing solutions to problems that everyone complains about but no one addresses, or taking public positions on issues that matter to your community or industry. But here's where the fox element becomes crucial. Bold action without strategic thinking often leads to failure or backlash. You must choose your moments carefully, ensuring that you act when you have a reasonable chance of success and when success will be visible and valuable to others. You must consider not just what you want to accomplish, but how your actions will be perceived and what second-order effects they might create. Consider the example of how Machiavelli himself handled his exile. When he was removed from his position in the Florentine government, he could have retreated into bitterness or spent his energy plotting revenge. Instead, he used his forced retirement to write works that would influence political thinking for centuries. He transformed a professional setback into an intellectual triumph that made his ideas more powerful and enduring than his political position ever could have been. The modern application of this principle requires developing what might be called strategic opportunism, the ability to recognize and seize moments when bold action can create disproportionate impact. This means staying alert to situations where your unique skills and perspective can address important needs that others are ignoring or handling inadequately. Strategic opportunism involves several key elements. First, you must develop the habit of looking beyond the immediate task or role to identify larger patterns and emerging needs. While others focus on executing their assigned responsibilities, you scan for opportunities to solve problems that haven't been formally assigned to anyone but that matter to the organization or community. Second, you must be willing to act without explicit permission or formal authority. This doesn't mean being insubordinate or disrespectful, but rather taking initiative in areas where your contribution would be valuable but where no one has specifically asked for your help. The key is to act in ways that clearly benefit others rather than just advancing your own interests. Third, you must be prepared to accept full responsibility for both the success and failure of your initiatives. When you act without being asked, you cannot blame others if things don't work out as planned. This responsibility is actually part of what makes your actions powerful. It demonstrates that you're willing to stake your reputation on your judgment and capabilities. The psychological dimension of strategic implementation involves understanding how people form impressions and make decisions about others. Machiavelli recognized that humans are not purely rational beings who carefully weigh evidence and make logical conclusions. Instead, they are emotional creatures who make quick judgments based on limited information and, then, seek evidence to support those judgments. This means that how you present your actions and ideas is often as important as the actions and ideas themselves. You must learn to frame your contributions in ways that make their value immediately apparent and personally relevant to your audience. This requires understanding what each person or group cares about most and translating your achievements into their language of value. For example, if you're speaking to financial leaders, you frame your contributions in terms of cost savings, revenue generation, or risk mitigation. If you're addressing operational managers, you emphasize efficiency improvements, process optimization, or resource utilization. If you're communicating with creative professionals, you highlight innovation, breakthrough thinking, or novel approaches to persistent challenges. The art lies in making these translations authentic rather than manipulative. You're not changing the substance of what you've accomplished, you're revealing different aspects of its value that resonate with different audiences. This skill, the ability to communicate the same achievement in multiple ways that all feel genuine and relevant, is what separates those who command broad attention from those who are appreciated only within narrow circles. Another crucial aspect of strategic implementation involves timing. Machiavelli understood that the same action can have vastly different impacts depending on when it's taken. Acting too early, before people are ready to receive your contribution, can make you seem out of touch or presumptuous. Acting too late, after someone else has seized the moment, makes you appear to be following rather than leading. Developing good timing requires what Machiavelli would recognize as political intelligence, the ability to read the currents of opinion and interest that flow through any group or organization. This means paying attention not just to what people say explicitly, but to what they're concerned about, what they're avoiding discussing, and what they're hoping someone else will address. Good timing also requires patience. There's often a temptation to act immediately when you see an opportunity, but sometimes the most powerful approach is to wait until the need for your contribution becomes more apparent to others. When people recognize the problem before you offer the solution, your intervention feels less like self-promotion and more like responsive leadership. The implementation of power also requires understanding the difference between authority and influence. Authority comes from position and can be granted or removed by others. Influence comes from competence and trust, and, once earned, it becomes much more difficult for others to take away. While you may not be able to control how much formal authority you're given, you have significant control over how much influence you develop. Influence grows through consistent demonstration of good judgment, reliable execution, and genuine concern for outcomes that matter to others. It's built through a series of interactions where you prove that your involvement makes situations better and problems more manageable. Building influence requires what might be called value-first thinking, approaching each situation with the primary goal of creating genuine benefit for others rather than advancing your own position. This doesn't mean being selfless or ignoring your own interests, but rather recognizing that your interests are best served when others see clear value in your participation and contribution. When you consistently approach situations with value-first thinking, something remarkable happens. People begin to associate your presence with positive outcomes. They start to include you in discussions and decisions not because they have to, but because they've learned that your involvement typically makes things better. You become someone they want to have around rather than someone they tolerate or manage. This transformation, from being managed to being sought out, represents a fundamental shift in your relationship with power. Instead of waiting for power to be given to you, you create it through the systematic delivery of value. Instead of hoping for opportunities, you become someone for whom opportunities are created. The strategic implementation of power also involves learning to navigate resistance and opposition skillfully. Machiavelli recognized that anyone who seeks to create change or command attention will inevitably encounter those who prefer the status quo or who see your advancement as threatening to their own position. Rather than viewing resistance as a problem to be eliminated, you must learn to see it as information to be processed and energy to be redirected. Resistance often reveals important concerns or perspectives that you may have overlooked. It can help you refine your approach and address legitimate issues before they become larger problems. More importantly, how you handle resistance becomes part of your reputation. If you respond to opposition with grace, intelligence, and flexibility, you demonstrate maturity and strength. If you react with defensiveness, anger, or rigidity, you reveal weaknesses that others can exploit. The most effective approach to resistance combines the lion and fox principles. You must be strong enough to persist in the face of opposition when your position is sound, but clever enough to find ways to address legitimate concerns and build bridges with those who initially oppose you. This might involve finding common ground with critics, acknowledging valid points they raise, or modifying your approach to address their concerns while maintaining your core objectives. It might mean building coalitions with others who share your goals, or finding ways to frame your initiatives so they align with the interests of potential opponents. The goal is not to eliminate all opposition, that's usually impossible and often counterproductive. Instead, the goal is to manage resistance in ways that allow you to achieve your objectives while building rather than burning relationships. This requires thinking several moves ahead, considering not just your immediate goals but the long-term implications of how you pursue them. As you develop proficiency in the strategic implementation of power, you'll notice that your influence begins to compound. Early successes create opportunities for bigger successes. Initial demonstrations of competence lead to more significant responsibilities. Your growing reputation attracts resources, allies, and opportunities that further expand your capabilities. This compounding effect is what transforms individuals from being competent contributors to being influential leaders. It's what allows them to move from responding to the agenda set by others to having significant input into what that agenda should be. It's what creates the kind of undeniable presence that Machiavelli understood as the foundation of lasting influence. Part 3, The Mastery of Lasting Influence. The final phase of Machiavelli's principles involves transcending tactical maneuvering to achieve something far more powerful, the creation of lasting influence that endures beyond specific situations or immediate relationships. This is where competent strategists evolve into true masters of their domain, where temporary advantages transform into enduring advantages, and where personal success contributes to legacy. Machiavelli understood that the ultimate goal is not merely to command attention in the moment, but to build systems and relationships that ensure your influence continues to grow even when you're not actively working to maintain it. This requires shifting from a mindset of individual achievement to one of ecosystem creation, building networks, developing others, and establishing principles that outlast any single project or position. The foundation of lasting influence lies in what Machiavelli would recognize as the creation of institutional power. This doesn't necessarily mean building formal institutions, though that's one approach. Rather, it means establishing patterns of interaction, methods of operation, and networks of relationships that naturally reinforce your position and extend your influence across time and circumstances. Consider how Machiavelli himself achieved this kind of lasting influence. His political career was relatively brief and ended in exile, yet his ideas continue to shape political thinking 5 centuries later. He achieved this by transforming his practical experience into principles that others could understand and apply. He created intellectual frameworks that proved useful across different contexts and time periods. The modern application of this approach involves identifying the patterns and principles underlying your successes and finding ways to share them in forms that others can adopt and adapt. This might involve developing methodologies that colleagues can use, creating training programs that spread your approaches, or writing about your experiences in ways that provide value to others facing similar challenges. When you transform your individual knowledge into shareable frameworks, several important things happen. First, your influence multiplies because others begin applying your ideas in contexts you might never have reached directly. Second, your reputation evolves from being known for what you can do personally to being known for the methods and insights you've developed. Third, you create a form of influence that becomes less dependent on your physical presence or continued involvement. This transformation requires developing what might be called systems thinking, the ability to see beyond individual tasks and projects to understand the larger patterns and processes that drive success. Instead of just executing effectively, you begin to understand why certain approaches work and others don't. Instead of just solving immediate problems, you develop frameworks for solving entire categories of problems. Systems thinking also involves recognizing that lasting influence comes from empowering others rather than simply outperforming them. Machiavelli understood that a prince who relies solely on his own capabilities is vulnerable, while one who develops the capabilities of others creates a more robust and enduring form of power. This means shifting from a competitive mindset to a developmental one. Instead of seeing colleagues as competitors for limited recognition or advancement, you begin to see them as potential multipliers of your influence. When you help others become more effective, and when they recognize your role in their development, you create a network of allies who have genuine reasons to support your continued success. The art of developing others while advancing your own interests requires what Machiavelli would appreciate as sophisticated strategic thinking. You must identify opportunities where helping others achieve their goals naturally advances your own objectives. You must find ways to share knowledge and opportunities that create value for others while establishing your reputation as someone worth knowing and following. This might involve mentoring junior colleagues in ways that showcase your expertise while developing their capabilities. It might mean proposing collaborative projects where your leadership helps others succeed while demonstrating your ability to coordinate complex efforts. It might involve sharing credit generously while ensuring that your role in creating success is clearly understood and appreciated. The key is to make your contributions to others' success visible not through self-promotion, but through the natural recognition that comes when people understand how your involvement made their achievements possible. When others succeed because of your guidance, methods, or support, they become testimonials to your value. When they advance in their careers or expand their influence, they often bring opportunities back to those who helped them develop. Another crucial aspect of lasting influence involves the strategic cultivation of what Machiavelli would recognize as institutional memory. This means ensuring that your contributions become part of the permanent knowledge and culture of the organizations and communities where you operate. Institutional memory is created through several mechanisms. Documentation plays a crucial role when you solve significant problems or develop effective approaches. Creating detailed records ensures that your methods can be referenced and applied by others in similar situations. Training and knowledge transfer activities establish your expertise in the minds of colleagues while ensuring that your approaches continue to influence outcomes even when you're not directly involved. Cultural influence represents an even more powerful form of institutional memory. This involves shaping the values, expectations, and standard practices of the groups where you operate. When your approaches to problem-solving become the way we do things here, when your standards for quality become the accepted norm, when your methods for collaboration become the default approach, you've achieved a form of influence that operates independently of your ongoing efforts to maintain it. Creating cultural influence requires patience and consistency. It means repeatedly demonstrating the value of certain approaches until others begin to adopt them naturally. It means establishing standards and expectations that others find compelling enough to embrace and maintain. It means becoming associated with positive changes that people want to preserve and extend. The development of lasting influence also requires what Machiavelli understood as the cultivation of strategic relationships that extend beyond immediate utility. While tactical relationships are built around specific exchanges of value, strategic relationships are built around shared interests, mutual respect, and long-term potential for collaboration. Strategic relationships require investment in people and causes that may not provide immediate returns but that align with your long-term objectives and values. This might involve supporting colleagues during difficult periods when they have nothing immediate to offer in return. It might mean contributing to industry organizations or community causes that advance issues you care about while building relationships with others who share those concerns. These relationships become valuable precisely because they're not purely transactional. When people know that you've supported them or their causes without expecting immediate reciprocation, they develop a different kind of loyalty and commitment to your success. When opportunities arise that could benefit you, they think of you not as someone seeking advantage, but as someone whose success would serve justice and merit. The cultivation of strategic relationships also involves what might be called reputation arbitrage, finding opportunities to support people and causes before they become widely recognized as valuable. When you identify and support emerging talent before others notice their potential, when you contribute to important causes before they become popular, when you align yourself with valuable but underappreciated ideas before they gain mainstream acceptance, you position yourself to benefit from their eventual success while building relationships based on genuine judgment and courage rather than opportunistic calculation. Machiavelli would also emphasize the importance of maintaining what he called the appearance of virtue while pursuing practical objectives. In the context of building lasting influence, this means ensuring that your methods and motivations can withstand scrutiny and that your success enhances rather than diminishes your reputation for integrity and competence. This requires developing the discipline to pursue your objectives through means that you're proud to have associated with your name. It means building influence in ways that make others want to emulate your approach rather than defend themselves against it. It means creating success that inspires respect rather than resentment, admiration rather than fear. The appearance of virtue is not about being perfect or avoiding all controversial decisions. It's about being thoughtful and principled in your approach, transparent about your motivations when appropriate, and consistent in applying standards of fairness and competence that others can respect even when they might prefer different outcomes. When your methods consistently reflect genuine competence and ethical consideration, your influence becomes more stable because it's based on qualities that people value over time rather than temporary advantages that might disappear with changing circumstances. People trust those whose success comes from abilities and approaches they admire, and trust is the foundation of all lasting influence. The mastery of lasting influence ultimately requires understanding that true power comes not from controlling others, but from becoming someone that others want to be influenced by. This happens when your success clearly benefits not just yourself but the organizations and communities where you operate. It happens when your methods and insights prove valuable to others facing their own challenges. It happens when your presence makes situations better in ways that people can recognize and appreciate. This kind of influence creates what Machiavelli would understand as a virtuous cycle. Your success creates opportunities to help others succeed. Their success reflects well on your judgment and capabilities. Their advancement often brings new opportunities back to you. Your growing network of successful relationships becomes a platform for even greater influence and impact. As you develop mastery in these principles, you'll find that influence becomes less effortful and more natural. Instead of working to command attention, you'll find that attention flows to you naturally because people have learned that your involvement tends to make things better. Instead of seeking opportunities, you'll find that opportunities seek you because others prefer to work with people whose judgment and capabilities they trust. This transformation, from someone who pursues influence to someone who naturally attracts it, represents the ultimate achievement of Machiavellian principles. It's the difference between temporary success and lasting legacy, between personal advancement and sustained impact, between commanding attention and earning respect that endures across time and changing circumstances. The journey from being someone others can ignore to someone they cannot ignore is ultimately a journey of development, developing capabilities that matter, developing strategies that work, developing relationships that endure, and developing a reputation that opens doors and creates opportunities. Machiavelli's principles provide a roadmap for this journey, but the destination, becoming someone whose influence naturally grows because others recognize its genuine value, represents the achievement of something far more powerful than mere political maneuvering. When you master these principles, you join the ranks of those who shape their environments rather than simply responding to them, who create opportunities rather than merely pursuing them, who build influence that compounds over time rather than requiring constant effort to maintain. You become, in Machiavelli's terms, a prince of your own domain, not through inheritance or appointment, but through the strategic application of intelligence, capability, and wisdom to the challenges and opportunities that define your world. This is the true promise of Machiavellian thinking, not the cynical manipulation of others for selfish gain, but the sophisticated development of yourself into someone whose influence flows naturally from competence, wisdom, and the consistent creation of value that others can recognize, appreciate, and benefit from. When you achieve this level of development, others cannot ignore you not because you demand their attention, but because they cannot afford to miss the insights, opportunities, and value that your presence represents. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest insight was not about the nature of power, but about the nature of excellence. Those who command lasting attention and influence do so not through tricks or manipulation, but through the patient development of capabilities and wisdom that make them genuinely valuable to others. They become impossible to ignore because ignoring them means missing out on something important, useful, and rare. This is the standard to which Machiavelli's principles ultimately point, becoming someone whose absence would be felt, whose insights are sought, whose participation makes endeavors more likely to succeed. When you achieve this standard, you have done what Machiavelli understood as the ultimate political act. You have made yourself essential not through dependency or fear, but through the consistent demonstration of value that others cannot replicate or replace. The path to such influence is open to anyone willing to study, develop, and apply these principles with patience, intelligence, and commitment to creating genuine value for others. Machiavelli's insights remain as relevant today as they were 5 centuries ago because they address fundamental truths about human nature and social dynamics that transcend any particular time period or context. Master these principles, and you master the art of building influence that endures.